Good evening and welcome to Wide Awake News. I'm your host for the evening, Gary Hendershot, and boy, do we have a pile of stuff to wade through tonight. Speaking of wading, they are wading in glow-in-the-dark water in northern Japan, and it's gotten so bad, or those of us in what is loosely referred to as alternative media have made so damn much noise that we're finally starting to see some coverage of this ongoing mess coming out of Fukushima, Japan, in what is guardedly referred to as the mainstream media. Yes, those dinosaurs who are bought off by commercial interests are actually breaking down and covering current events out of Fukushima.
The article that I'm commenting on tonight was published by BBC, but frankly, the news has been slowly making the rounds. It's been discussed on Associated Press. ABC News has written articles on it. Bottom line is this ongoing mess in Fukushima is in the news again. Now, this has been going on for 2.5 years, and at this point, nobody has any idea what the hell to do about it. Nobody's got a clue, but it seems that finally the Japanese have put up their hands and said, if anybody's got any ideas, we'd like a little bit of help. Now, here's what's currently got people's attention. Now, if you look at this satellite image, the blowed up reactors are in the upper part of that picture. They're right on the coastline, sitting right on the ocean. Okay, now that area that has been highlighted, that has the diagram around it, and for those of you who are listening to this on radio, I wish I could give you this graphic image, but basically what we're looking at is we're looking at a satellite image where we've got the Fukushima reactors, which take, a small little notch in the upper center of this image. And then there is this huge field in the bottom of the picture that is probably 50 times the land area that's covered by the reactors themselves, where a whole bunch of makeshift temporary holding tanks have been built to store the water that they're using to try to cool these reactors as they continue to melt down. Well, the word has finally come out that this field of holding tanks is itself leaking into groundwater. Nobody knows how much, and if they do know how much, they ain't telling us. What we have heard from the operators of the Fukushima plant is that some 300 tons of highly radioactive water have leaked from at least one storage tank on the site and is now making its way into the groundwater. Now, the interesting thing about the layout of Fukushima, and once again I apologize to the radio listeners, you can't see my my on-screen graphic that I'm putting up for the folks on Justin TV who are watching the video portion of this broadcast. But what the diagram shows is it shows the reactor and the turbine sitting right on the coast. I mean, we're talking 100 yards from the ocean. We got groundwater that goes from the land out to the ocean, and then we got these holding tanks up on a hill behind the reactor and turbine assemblies. The groundwater is quite literally flowing from the land to the ocean right under the Fukushima nuclear plant, carrying with it whatever radioactive waste is currently leaking out of that plant. Over 1,000 of these holding tanks have been built, and 400 additional tons of highly radioactive cooling water is being deposited in these tanks every day. The tanks are at about 85% of their capacity. Frankly, they have no choice but to discharge all of this highly radioactive water into the ocean. There is no other alternative that anybody seems to be able to come up with. Bottom line is Fukushima, contrary to earlier reports, is still an issue. It will continue to be an issue throughout my lifetime, my children's lifetime, my grandchildren's lifetime, my great-grandchildren's lifetime, and frankly, some of the radioactive isotopes will continue to glow in the dark for 25,000, 30,000 years. There is no end to this thing. Now, Chernobyl was bad. Okay? Chernobyl was really bad. But Chernobyl happened on land. It affected a lot of people. It's still affecting people to this day. But, you know, the Russians were pretty fast. They got in there. They did their best they could to contain their mess. And to a large degree, they've mitigated it pretty well. They've kept people out of an exclusion zone to where, you know, it's not going to continue to impact ongoing generations, we hope. But this Fukushima thing, nobody's got a plan. Nobody seems to have any idea what to do about it. And yeah, whenever they dump this water into the ocean currents carry it right around the Pacific Ocean to the west coast of the United States. So if you think you're immune to Fukushima because that happened, way over yonder, you know, that's not my problem. It's a Japanese problem. It don't bother me. You had best guess again. And if you like sushi, good luck with that. Needless to say, the article I'm referencing is from the BBC, but frankly, you know, you got to give the major media credit where credit's due. It appears that this time around, they actually are reporting on it, at least. You know, so I don't know. It's hard to say. I wish I had an answer to that. I wish I could tell you what to do. Now, I listened the other night to a report by a fellow named Bill Deagle. Now, you know, some people like Bill Deagle, some people hate him. I've got no opinion. But, you know, he at least kind of sort of almost proposed a plan that was hopeful. You know, I don't know if this guy is, you know, talking trash or what. But, you know, at least he had some ideas about how this Fukushima thing might be mitigated. I just wonder, are the best and brightest considering? Are they thinking about what we might do? By the way, for those of you who did not notice, I understand that the break 1740 won't be going on tonight, so we're just going to press right on through. Now, the big issue in the news this week has got to be what appears to be a headlong run-up to war with the nation of Syria. Now, you know, the United States seems to have been in a non-stop war since the 9/11 incident. And frankly, if you think about it, probably before that. You know, we took a little break after Vietnam because we got our asses kicked. But, once we did a little thing called Grenada and did a little thing called Panama, we got all, pumped up with steroids again. And, it's interesting that we seem to have been kicking somebody's butt ever since. Bottom line is, in nationwide polls, it appears that some 60% of the American population is dead set against going to war with Syria. Bottom line is, they have not sold us that this is necessary. In general, the American public just wants to be left alone, okay? We really don't want to go to war with anybody. It's not in our nature. It's not in our benefit. We have no desire to throw our treasure and our children into a meat grinder for no good reason. There is no good, sane, rational argument that the Syrians have done anything to the United States that warrants kicking their ass. There is no real justification. Now, we had John Kerry stand up on a soapbox the other day and say, the Syrians have thrown poison gas at their population. And that calls for American retaliation. He used the word retaliation. Look it up. Okay? If you got a Funkin' Wagnalls near you, look it up. Look at what retaliation means. John Kerry, you got a copy of Funkin' Wagnalls? Do you have any idea what retaliation means? Retaliation means somebody came along and just kicked your butt for no good reason. Okay, now you got a reason, you got an excuse to retaliate, okay? Even if Syria did gas its own people, which is highly questionable. It's highly questionable. But even if they did, it's none of our damn business. They didn't do anything to us. We don't know why they might have gassed their own people, if they did. And again, it's highly questionable. The Russians say their experts went in and investigated, and the people who really did this gas thing was what we call freedom fighters, what the Syrian government calls terrorists. But, you always got to remember, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And those guys that we keep calling terrorists, to somebody out there, they're freedom fighters. And the ones we're calling freedom fighters, as far as Assad is concerned, they're terrorists. They're foreigners, they're foreign mercenaries who have come into the nation of Syria and are raising hell. Now, whoever did this gas attack on Syria, a lot of people were killed and injured. It was a terrible situation. Now, the United Nations said, well, we'll come in and we'll inspect. We'll see who did this. Syria opened its arms and said, come on down. We will let you investigate this. Russians have already taken a look. The Russians say, it was the so-called freedom fighters who launched the poison gas attack. Well, on the way in, the UN investigators apparently took some sniper fire, and they backed out. So the United States says, all right, that's an excuse. We need to put U.S. boots on the ground to make sure that them UN investigators can get in there and take a look at what's going down. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. Now, there are an awful lot of, shall we say, maneuvers going on right now. A lot of messy stuff related to Tomahawk missiles and deployment of naval assets are starting to look very...
Those who understand such things are looking at it and saying, you know what? It's looking like it's going to go down. Now, there's a lot of evidence that a war with Syria is about to come down. But of all the evidence that people have laid on the table so far, the one item that I took the most note of is the fact that Israel is apparently negotiating a contract with an outfit called Genie Energy, which is a subsidiary of a company owned by Dick Cheney and friends, to exploit oil and gas resources in an area that Israel has occupied for decades, that is within the borders of Syria.
How does that work? The Israelis can lease oil and gas that belongs to somebody else? Well, it turns out the Israelis have been exploiting oil and gas resources that are owned by both Egypt and the Palestinians for quite a while now, so seems this is just in the nature of the Israelis. Yes, our friends, our greatest ally in the Middle East, Israel, an apartheid nation built on land
that has basically been invaded and occupied by Europeans. Now you wonder why the Muslims take exception to this. If you understand history, and you know it from the Muslim perspective of how these Europeans kept waging these wars called the Crusades, you would understand that, there is a ongoing paranoia among Muslim nations that Europe will once again use one of these holy crusades to basically occupy and chop up portions of the Middle East, kind of like they did after World War I and World War II. And it is just one more example of a European crusade to inhabit territory should be run by the indigenous people, not Europeans from Poland and Russia, regardless of what religion they profess. I think at this point we are coming up about 40 seconds from a break. I do want to let the audience know that in the second half of tonight's program, I will be entertaining your phone calls. So if we cover an item that just, really tweaks you and you got something that
you think you want to get off your chest, feel free to call in at 877-342-6673. And if I think I do hear the music playing in the background. So please do stand by. We're going to take our halfway mark break, and I'll be back with more Wide Awake News right after these important commercial announcements. My microphone when we come back from the break. Needless to say, if things do go a little crazy in the Middle East over the next few weeks, you might want to look into, getting some of what Mike Rivero refers to as, sunblock 10,000, because, this mess that we're getting involved with over there could very easily go from bad to worse to cataclysmic. Enough on that issue for the time being. Now, why would anybody in their right mind want to start a global conflagration? Now, I grew up during a period in time, when we used to sing that little duck and cover song, and they used to tell us, room cloud, you best, fall flat on your face, try to put your head between your knees and see if maybe you can kiss your... we were taught, hide under your desk. I mean, the stuff that we were told was absolutely ridiculous. If this thing goes bad, there's no place to hide. There is no place on the surface of the earth that will continue to support human life. Now, some say, all the elites, they got this underground bunker, and they're gonna go down there, and they're gonna live off of those baby food drinks or whatever for the next 100 years, and they might be able to come out of their tunnels in, I don't know, 2 or 3 generations. Of course, by that time, they'll be accustomed to living down there, and they probably won't want to live above ground. Who knows? Bottom line is, our current civilization is at risk. For all I know, these are sort of like the last days of the folks in Atlantis, with a lot of people standing on soapboxes saying, "What the are you crazy? Are you insane? Stop it." And yet they've got some kind of thing going on where they're either oblivious or they actually think they can win, or who knows? For all I know, they're infected with some sort of, weird disease that makes them think that they and their progeny are immune. Wish I knew. But one thing that a good old-fashioned war would do is distract folks from other news. And yeah, there is some other news. This fella here, I just, for those on the radio, I just put up a picture of a fella by the name of Larry Summers. Larry Summers. That name might mean something to some of you. This guy's probably going to replace Ben Bernanke as the head of the central bank for the United States. Well, this guy Summers, a memo has leaked out. The memo confirmed every conspiracy freak's fantasy. This is, by the way, this is from an article that I got at Greg Palast, P-A-L-A-S-T. It's Greg, GREG-PALAST.com. It's an interesting article coming from this writer. The memo confirmed every conspiracy freak's fantasy. Back in the late 1990s, the top U.S. Treasury officials secretly conspired with a small cabal of banker big shots to rip apart financial regulation all across the planet. See, if we had dropped Glass-Steagall and deregulated our banks and allowed commercial banks and investment banks to do whatever they wanted and started all this selling of these high-risk securities that seem to be the only financial activity going on in the U.S. economy right now. But if we'd have done that, nobody else in the world had. Well, then our banks would have been unsafe, and there would have been a rapid flight of investment money away from U.S. banks into somebody else's banks, where they actually did banking with vaults instead of paper and promises. Okay? So when these regulations went down, it wasn't just the United States. This was a global phenomena. It all happened at once. All nations in the world, all of a sudden, dropped trowel and handed the bankers a can of Vaseline. Or not. As we enter the end game of the World Trade Organization financial services negotiations, I believe it would be a good idea for you to touch base with the CEOs, people like John Corzine of Goldman Sachs, David Kamansky of Merrill Lynch, David Coulter of Bank of America, John Reed of Citibank, Walter Shipley of Chase Manhattan. Those were the CEOs that were called in to advise on how to all the banks in the world at the same time. So how do you convince a country? Well, let's just take Ecuador, okay? Ecuador is your classic banana republic, okay? Bananas is the mainstay of the Ecuador economy, okay? That is how they generate their foreign trade. That's how they get dollars and ruples and whatever else that they can use to purchase the goods that they need. Well, the World Trade Organization went to Ecuador and said, hey, if you refuse to sign on, you can feed your bananas to the monkeys and go back into bankruptcy. Ecuador signed. Basically, such techniques were used on nations all around the world to cause them to deregulate their banking institutions and get them involved in this wild and crazy casino that has become the financial norm in the world. Now, the United States admits to being about, well, it's pushing on 17, it's hard for me to say, $17 trillion. The United States admits to being very nearly 16 and a half, 17. When you get numbers that big, what's a half a billion here or there, but it's almost $17 trillion. They admit to being $17 trillion in the hole. But everybody ignores the exposure that the United States has in what's called derivatives. Derivatives. You've heard that word. Very few who are not involved in finance really know what it means. Basically, what you're doing is, you make a risky loan, and then to cover your bet on that loan, you buy an insurance policy so that if the guy you made the loan to defaults, you get to collect on the insurance. That is a derivative. And these derivatives themselves have been packaged and bundled and turned into financial instruments that people invest in. Hedge funds, IRAs, 401ks are heavily leveraged into these derivatives. Oh, I'm hearing the music. We're going to wrap up on this derivatives issue as soon as I come back from this next important commercial announcement, so stay tuned for more Wide Awake News. the network sold enough product during that break to make up for losing that 17-minute break. I was a little surprised there. Needless to say, we were talking about this fella, Larry Summers, and his leaked memo that describes how they are going to totally abolish all regulation on banks all over the world, all at the same time in the late 1990s, and damn if they didn't pull it off. Now, this is a smoking gun, okay? This is serious. And, you know, if all of a sudden everybody wakes up one day and realizes just how badly they've been screwed, there's going to be a big sale on rope in New York, and the light poles going up and down Wall Street are going to have some new decorations. All right? So, you know, this is kind of scary because, you know, the word's creeping out. These big shots are starting to get the idea, you know. The number of people out there who are no longer looking at the boogeyman of the day, but they're catching on. They're catching on that it's reaching critical mass. All right? That's really kind of scary for both sides, for everybody involved, because when these guys get scared, they start looking for a major distraction because they really don't want you looking at them. They don't want you looking at the real enemy. They got to find some kind of a distraction to get your mind off of it. What better distraction than a good old-fashioned war? Yeah. Let's get them monkey people fighting amongst themselves, you know. Let's pitch the white ones against the brown ones, and the brown ones against the black ones, and the black ones against the yellow ones. Yeah, that's the way we'll do it. We'll get them all messed up and mixed up and fighting amongst themselves so they don't realize who the real enemy is. They've played this game before. They're playing it again. Your neighbors, people you work with, are going to fall for it. They're going to say, oh, yeah, we got to go kick the ass of them there Syrians. Yeah, we just got to do it. Yep, John Kerry says we got to do it. Yeah, he says it's retaliation. We got to retaliate. Well, I don't know what they did to us, but we got to retaliate. Otherwise, we'll look wimpy to the world, boy. We got to go over and kick some butt. That's how it's sold to you. It's been, look, we have fallen for this so many times. I mean, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me thousands of times, You starting to get the idea? All right, on to another issue. Last week, right here. Ain't it interesting? Hey, I'm in the news tonight. Last week on Wide Awake News, I played a little clip, you know, about, 2.5, 3 minutes of one of my favorite social commentators, a philosopher, comedian, a fellow who I've admired for decades. Play a little clip because I thought what he had to say about it was germane to the discussion at the time. Well, YouTube saw fit to put a copyright claim against that video, basically prohibiting me and Charlie McGrath from earning any ad revenue on that particular video. Well, now, of course, I disputed the claim. I mean, there is this thing under copyright law called fair use. I didn't steal anything from anybody. I didn't deny anybody any revenue. If anything, I gave the artist a hell of a plug and probably directed a little traffic their way because I liked the material. It was germane to the argument that I presented, and I felt it was appropriate use of that material. But, there are people out there, in particular, an outfit called CD Baby. CD Baby, and Warner Media, an outfit called WMG, that basically go around logging any media that they can find that doesn't have a current copyright on it. They just log it as being theirs. And then they turn around and basically extort money out of people who might, through perfectly legitimate use, tiptoe over their over one of their hot properties. Well, it turns out that WMG claims the copyright to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and Happy Birthday. So, if you happen to record your kid's birthday party and all the other kids are singing Happy Birthday to Little Timmy, you could get a copyright hit from an outfit called WMG, who swears up and down they own the copyright to Happy Birthday. That is how contorted copyright law is in the United States of America today. Now, there's a fellow out there named Lessig, Larry Lessig. He spells his last name Lessig. This guy has some notoriety. He's the guy who basically invented the idea of the Creative Commons copyright scheme. Almost all my material, almost everything I publish on YouTube, I publish with a Creative Commons copyright on it. I mean, I don't care. Use it any way you want, as long as you give me credit for being the creator of that material. I don't care what you do with it. Well, this guy Lessig has had a DMCA. This is basically a takedown notice. He's had one of his videos from a presentation he did taken down because he did something very similar to what I did. He played a little clip out of somebody else's piece, fully and certainly within the bounds of fair use under copyright law, a little bitty clip of somebody to support an argument he was making. And he's been hit with a DMCA claim, had his video pulled down for use of this material. Well, this guy actually has a few bucks in his pocket, actually has attorneys, and hopefully Larry Lessig will shake him up a little bit. We'll just have to see. By the way, Warner Media is also being sued for some of their abusive practices under copyright laws. CD Baby, yeah, they've already heard from me. We'll see what happens. On to other news. I'll tell you, last week, I tried to fit in some movie reviews, and so I didn't time the program right. I rambled on about a couple of topics, and didn't really get to my news reviews, so I had to run through them real fast right at the tail end of the show. So tonight, I made it a point to leave a little bit of time to provide you with my movie reviews. Now, there are two movies I have seen recently that I'm going to highly recommend. Okay? I mean, all right, now, first of all, in context, okay? I'm not Siskel. I'm not Ebert. Okay? I don't go to a movie expecting to be enlightened. I don't go to a movie expecting to see grandiose messages or hidden meanings or any of that nonsense. You know what? I go to a movie to be entertained. Okay? It's been a hard week. I busted my butt to make enough money to hopefully, buy some groceries and pay the rent. And, I just want a little relaxation, Maybe I'd like to take the wife to see something she wants to see. Maybe I'd like to go see a movie. Maybe I would just like a little bit of high-quality entertainment. I want characters that I can identify with. I want a good guy that I can really, really like. I want a bad guy that I can really, really hate. I want a story. I want to be told a story. It's got to be interesting. It's got to, there's got to be characters and a story that I can identify with and enjoy. Well, here's a couple that I think you can. You remember the Lone Ranger and Tonto? I grew up with them as a Saturday morning fare. Well, somebody has done a remake, and believe it or not, that guy dressed up as Tonto with the chicken on his head, well, that's Johnny Depp in makeup, and he pulls it off. He does a really good Tonto. The Lone Ranger and Tonto I can highly recommend as being an old-fashioned Western, bang-bang, shoot-'em-up, a good guy you can really love, a bad guy you can really, really hate, and a story that is engaging and interesting. It almost appears these guys broke bad and hired a writer who could actually produce an interesting storyline. If you're looking for some good quality entertainment that you can take the whole family to see, The Lone Ranger is a good bet. I also like the latest Star Trek movie. Now, here again, you got good guys you can really, really like. You got a bad guy that you can really, really hate. There's a lot of action. It's a guy flick. There's a lot of explosions, a lot of chases. It's definitely a guy-type flick. But, it's cowboys and Indians in outer space, and they pull it off well. I've got nothing but good to say about the latest episode of the Star Trek genre. If you're a Star Trek fan, yeah, that one's definitely worth seeing. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed tonight's Wide Awake News. I hope you have a good week, what's left of it. And stay tuned for Jeff Rentz. He's coming up right after this next commercial break, and I'll see you again next Monday. Good night, all. Market your shops, your clothes. My dad, he's got a lot of fear, I know, but enough pride inside, nothing let that